So it's like it came out of absolutely nowhere. So that's one of the problems. It looks like this thing came out of with no cousins, no uncles, no parents. That's a suspicious story.
It is a suspicious story because, like I said, the close relatives that you're mentioning, they are not convincing for me that they could have, in such a short time, led to the emergence of the SARS-CoV-2, and therefore it leaves open of a intentional manipulation and accidental release for me.
Sorpresa, il coronavirus CoV-2 che ha travolto il mondo non viene dai pipistrelli, nessuno lo ha mai trovato in loro, non viene da nessun altro animale intermedio, nessuno lo ha mai trovato in loro. Invece ha, chissà come, una speciale preferenza per le cellule umane, che infetta molto più ferocemente di qualsiasi altra specie conosciuta. Questo, a detta del professor Nicolas Petrovsky e del suo team alla Flinders University in Australia, è molto sospetto. Soprattutto sono saltati fuori i misteri della versione cinese sull'origine del virus, i comportamenti incomprensibili della scienziata al centro del ciclone, la dottoressa Zheng Li Shi del laboratorio top secret di Wuhan. E infine salta anche fuori che un virus che venga manipolato in laboratorio per attaccare l'uomo è totalmente irriconoscibile da un virus naturale, per cui la mano del manipolatore rimarrà nascosta per sempre. E cominciamo proprio da qui. Ci sono solo 3 scienziati di fama mondiale che oggi contestano con forza l'origine naturale del CoV-2. Sono il professor Richard Ebright, biologo molecolare della Rutgers University in America, il professor Nicolas Petrovsky, endocrinologo e immunologo alla Flinders University in Australia, e il professor Michael Antoniou, lettore in genetica molecolare alla prestigiosa King's College University di Londra. Ho intervistato proprio quest'ultimo, svolgiamo le tesi, soppesiamo le accuse e poi salta fuori una gola profonda cinese da non sottovalutare, più la solita botta finale. Dr. Simon Wayne Hobson, a world-class virologist at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, stated to me, quote, "Engineering a virus leaves a signature and a bloody big signature," unquote. Both you and Professor Ebright at Rutgers University, equally world-class scientists, have suggested that this is not at all true. As you just said, there are several ways to tamper with viral genomes and leave no trace of the human hand.
If you do something more subtle, more nuanced, you could say, where you just change a few base units of the sequence of, say, the bat coronavirus in, say, the region of the what's known as the receptor binding motif, the actual region of the spike protein that identifies and docks on to the ACE2 receptor on human cells. If you did just subtle base unit changes that change the amino acid sequence of the spike protein in this area, this would be impossible to distinguish whether it was a natural mutation and selection or an intentional laboratory manipulation. Because you can do this, yes, based on the huge amount of information we have already about the nature of the receptor binding domain, the receptor binding motif of the virus. You can make very educated assessments on how I could change. I've got this bad virus, it doesn't infect human cells, but I can make some very good educated changes. If I change this base to this and this amino acid, I can go from a bad virus to a human virus. And if you did this, it would be impossible. You don't leave a signature behind. This is the key. You don't leave some kind of sign, oh, here, human manipulation. Impossible. You could not say whether it was a natural mutation or an intentional human intervention.
So it's like it came out of absolutely nowhere. So that's one of the problems. It looks like this thing came out of with no cousins, no uncles, no parents. That's a suspicious story.
It is a suspicious story because, like I said, the close relatives that you're mentioning, they are not convincing for me that they could have, in such a short time, led to the emergence of the SARS-CoV-2, and therefore it leaves open of a intentional manipulation and accidental release for me.
Se c'è uno scienziato al centro della tempesta mondiale sul coronavirus, questa è la dottoressa Zheng Li-Shi, la cosiddetta Batwoman, la super esperta di coronavirus dei pipistrelli, che lavora al Wuhan Institute of Virology e particolarmente nel suo laboratorio Biosafety Level 4, quello che gestisce i microbi più letali esistenti. Il professor Antonio a un certo punto mi ha segnalato un testo scientifico di una gola profonda cinese, il quale accusa direttamente la Zheng Li-Shi di frode scientifica, di aver prodotto con la gain of function il CoV-2, di esserselo fatto scappare di mano devastando il mondo e infine di aver organizzato nel panico l'insabbiamento di tutto questo architettando in laboratorio il virus padre del CoV-2 e della Covid-19 e persino i suoi due virus cugini. Ma attenzione, il professor Michael Antonio ci dice che il testo del ricercatore cinese Gola Profonda, lungi dall'essere complottismo, è, cito, una fonte di informazioni scientifiche credibili. Quindi eccovene due, semplificate al massimo possibile per l'audience non esperta. He explains that the spike protein on the outside of a virus and its RBD are those responsible for how virulent the virus will be against human cells. The whistleblower then says that there is a huge difference in the spike protein S1 on CoV-2 compared with the same spike on its alleged natural cousins ZC45, ZXC21. He says that this cannot be explained by natural evolution, and this means that CoV-2 was engineered to become highly infectious. Plausible?
I think it is plausible because the number of changes, again, starting from some parent, the proposed proximal origin, like these two that this person suggests, the number of changes that would need to happen are so many that the time span becomes so great that you cannot say that, oh, this virus that was isolated from bats in China back in 2013 and reported several years later as a proximal origin, the time lapse is simply not sufficient for these numbers of changes to have happened naturally and selected for. So again, this is one of the, you could say, one of the pieces of evidence of an intentional manipulation. There are others as well, but this is one of them.
La Gola Profonda ci dice che la dottoressa Zheng Li-Shi, di colpo, nel gennaio di quest'anno, pubblica di fronte al mondo la sequenza del virus che sarebbe il padre del CoV-2 e della Covid-19, cioè un coronavirus chiamato RA-TG13, scoperto, dice lei, nel 2013. La Gola Profonda, nel suo studio, sembra dimostrare molecolarmente che il cosiddetto padre del CoV-2 è un falso fatto al computer per depistare tutti verso l'origine naturale della pandemia. Infatti nessuno sa se questo virus, RA-TG13, esiste realmente in vivo e, ribadisce il ricercatore cinese Gola Profonda, è comunque assurdo che per una scoperta di questa rilevanza mondiale la Zheng Li-Shi abbia aspettato ben 7 anni prima di rivelarla e guarda caso la rivela nel momento in cui esplode il disastro pandemia da Wuhan, un comportamento che desta solo forti sospetti.
I do find it very unusual behavior by a scientist, because normally as scientists, when we make a discovery, and we are proud of it and we publish it and we gain recognition for this finding. And for somebody of Zheng Li-Shi's background, if she had the sequence of this virus many years ago, she would have seen very, very clearly just how close it could be to a human pathogen. So it is a mystery to me why Xi Zhengli did not report at that time, if she really had it, if she really had the sequence at that time.
As I said, the geopolitical consequences of evidence that China has wrecked the world would be incalculable. So are you surprised that there is so much pressure for this investigation never to happen?
I'm not surprised at all, of course not, because not only are there, there are huge, as you say, financial but geopolitical consequences of a global nature. So it's not surprising that many people in high places are doing their best to say that this could not have happened through human intervention, that it was a natural occurrence, a zoonotic entity and not a laboratory creation.
This coronavirus is capable of pathogenesis. You are a geneticist, so this coronavirus is capable of pathogenesis, which appeared to me immediately as absolutely extraordinary. I therefore asked Professor David Walt at Harvard, whom you know, who is a pathologist, eminent pathologist, and I said, is this normal for a virus to attack so many things in one go? So many organs, and he said, Paolo, highly unlikely.
Yeah.
Wouldn't this by itself constitute, I'm not saying proof, but a lead to the fact that this thing is not natural?
Very good. I really like this point. It's one of those pieces of evidence that, because again, you could select for these properties in the laboratory, even if far more easily than to wait for this to happen through natural mutation to selection. Because you could select, you could, like I mentioned earlier.
Oh, this is frightening, though. You can do this in a laboratory?
Of course. Like I mentioned earlier, you can use these saturation mutagenesis approaches and selection procedures. You can, in the laboratory, you could not only select the variants of the coronavirus you create in the laboratory with all these different spike proteins and other components, you can select not only for them being able to bind and infect to human airway cells of the lung, the airway and the lung, but you can select on any human type of cell you want. You see, I can select for infection of neurons, liver, muscle, you name it. I can go through this iterative process. I can go through this iterative process with multiple different cell types until I can find a variant that can have a infectivity of many, many different cell types.
E dunque, alla fine, di tutto il mondo accademico e scientifico ai livelli che potrebbero smuovere davvero le cose, sono rimasti solo loro tre, Richard E. Bright, Nicolas Petrosky e Michael Antoniou, ad avere il coraggio di mettere i loro illustri nomi e relative carriere alla sbarra per dire al pubblico no, per ciò che sappiamo finora non fu un pipistrello.
I don't know whether people like the three of us that you mentioned, why we have had the courage to speak out and others have not. I don't know the reason, but I do know that people, a lot of the time, they don't want to get involved in these bigger public debated issues because they fear for their positions.